Good afternoon to everyone joining us from Asia Pacific region, and a very good morning to our colleagues and speakers in Europe as well. My name is Elodie Maria Sub of the Switch Asia Policy Support Component. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar on a topic that's really reshaping our relationship with the products that we use every day, the EU's Right to Repair Directive and the principle of the right to repair. So I'm going to go through some housekeeping rules. Next slide, please. Yeah. As people come in. So you can see here that as participants, your microphones are muted to avoid any interference. And we really encourage you to ask any questions in the chat Q&A box. But if you missed something during the webinar, do not worry. It is recorded and you will receive it by email after this webinar. Please also feel welcome to raise your hand to ask a question. There's usually few time for live questions, but we hope there might be some. So yes, and now next slide, please. Yeah. As you see, we're going to have an opening and welcome address, which is followed by keynote speech by Mr. Ugo Valauri, co-director for international strategy at the Restart Project, and a panel discussion. We're very lucky to have an excellent group of experts today from the European Commission, civil society, and the private sector to help us really unpack the questions around the right to repair. And for the opening address, I'd like to leave the floor to Ms. Eva Bille, who is the head of circular economy at the European Environmental Bureau. The European Environmental Bureau is our partner in this series of webinars about EU policies in the Asia Pacific region. So perhaps, Yaya, you can spotlight Eva so we can see her.
Thank you. Thank you, Elodie, and thank you for the invitation for this webinar. For those of you who don't know the European Environmental Bureau, we are a large network of environmental civil society organizations in Europe, and we have more than, well, nearly 200 members in 41 countries. And we are really keen to work with the European Commission to improve the legislations that are on the table. And I think this topic of right to repair is really close to my heart, because it's true that every day we buy products that are designed to break. And we all experience that it's become increasingly difficult and expensive to repair and replace key parts because they're glued together, because the spare parts or repair labor are more expensive than a new product, especially now that ultra cheap products online are growing in popularity worldwide, or because the screws are proprietary, or because information is not available, or because software updates no longer are being offered. There are so many reasons why. But extended lifespans for all products are at the heart of a truly circular economy, and therefore key to the acceleration of the green transition. And moving away from a linear model means evolving from products that are used once or sparingly and thrown away towards a model that privileges reuse, repurpose, repair, refurbishment, remanufacture, before considering more energy-intensive or polluting options like recycling or obviously landfill or incineration. The optimal model would be a truly circular economy for Europe and Asia and the rest of the world. This alleviates environmental, social, and economic risks, as value is decoupled from resource extraction and more people have access to more affordable and lasting products. Repair is obviously a crucial element in this discussion, and I'm so glad that we'll be discussing the implementation of the Right to Repair Directive. What does it really do? It's a right to repair in principle, but what is factually the change that will happen for Europeans, but also obviously for Asian stakeholders and the rest of the world. So I'm very glad to hear from all these speakers what what they think and what the next steps are also from the European Commission to implementing this directive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eva, for these welcoming remarks and for guiding us through the importance of the right to repair and today's discussion. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Mr. Ugo Valauri, who is a co-director for international strategy at the Restart Project. We'll learn more about the Restart Project in his presentation. So maybe we can bring back up the slides, and I'll leave the floor to Ugo.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
I am here representing not just the Restart Project, which is a charity that we started back in 2013 in London, in the UK, bringing more visibility and support to the community repair movement, going from starting community repair events in London all the way to aggregating data about the reasons people can't repair often the products they already own, and bringing this data to fruition to policymakers to really push for what we want, which is a universal right to repair, a right for everyone to be able to repair all the products they own. But this work goes well beyond the scope of our organization, of the Restart Project. And so today I'm here to represent some of the important work that we've done building and co-steering the European Right to Repair campaign. Next slide. Which is a coalition of 190 organizations across 30 European countries, bringing together really a true mix of stakeholders that represent different perspectives, but aligned on wanting to bring real change, tangible change, from civil society to refurbishers, to marketplaces, to community repair groups, to environmental NGOs, and businesses working on repair. Next slide. Just to give you a bit of a spotlight on the range of organizations that are involved, if you look at just our steering group, you see obviously the European Environmental Bureau, represented also here by Eva, the Restart Project, marketplace like Back Market, an organization focused on standards like ECOS, campaigning organizations in France, HOP, and in Germany, Rundertisch Reparatur, a network of repair groups and experts across the whole country, an important refurbishing company as Swappy, network in the Netherlands, such as Technic Nederland, representing installers and other organizations working on bringing repair, and iFixit, that many of you probably know as being the leading source of not just spare parts and repair tools, but also independently built repair manuals to help everyone repair many more things that manufacturers would allow us to otherwise. Next. Why the right to repair? Eva already beautifully said it, but basically, let's remember that particularly electronic products have a high environmental footprint, and for many of these products, the highest density of impact occurs before you ever switch them on. For a smartphone, about 80% of its overall impact indeed occurs in the manufacturing phase. So extending the lifetime of these products is the best possible thing we can do to reduce pressure on extraction of new materials and of all the most impactful parts of the life of a product. And in Europe, definitely, some of the work that we started was justified by the fact that there's a high awareness among people that we need to require manufacturers to do a lot better than they currently do when it comes to repairability of our products. Next slide. What do we mean by right to repair? We mean that products should be designed well to be easier to be disassembled and repair when needed. Repair should be affordable and fairly accessible to everyone, and anti-repair practices should be banned. And consumers need to be informed, so need to have access to all the criteria to understand it, whether a product is repairable or not at the time they're buying it. Next. So this brings me to the Right to Repair Directive, the Directive on Common Rules Promoting the Repair of Goods. That is today's focus. And I'm saying this because there's clearly a range of other policies that are taking place, developing in the EU that are partly directly linked to the effectiveness of this directive, and others that work in parallel. So the first thing to say about this directive is that it currently covers a certain amount of products that are available in Europe, but it doesn't really cover the vast majority of products. Why? Because, first of all, it only covers business to consumer products. And also, it requires products to be already covered by repairability requirements, so eco design requirements, which are currently available for a very small minority of the products we see. And just to give you some perspective, in 2024, with the Restart Project and other organizations, we released a report looking at data from community repair groups around the world and seeing that for over 94% of the products that we see at these events, there wouldn't be any repairability legislation in sight yet. So there's clearly a lot more work that needs doing, but this directive offers a great opportunity to start looking at what can change from now on, given that as more repairability requirements are developed, they will be incorporated in the scope for the new products to be covered by the directive. Next slide. So for those products that are covered, and we're going to focus on those, depending on the repairability criteria defined for that product, there will be up to 10 years requirement for the manufacturer to provide a repairable repair service for that product. And it could be directly or via a subcontracted operator. And again, this is something I'm going to mention a few times for a reasonable price. This remains like a key point for future discussion. Next slide. One of the aspects that we've covered through our data is the lack of affordable access to spare parts. And this directive does mention the fact that prices should be reasonable, so not deterring repair for access to spare parts for independent repairers. But this is indeed the key point. There is no direct definition of what a reasonable part price means. And so some of the questions around implementation, now that we are in the phase when the directive is being introduced in national legislation across the EU, this isn't likely to be solved in the transposition period, but leaves open a question about what will happen to the prices of repair and spare prices once from the 1st of August 2026 in every EU country it will enter into force. Next. One of the aspects that we insisted on is the fact that aside from the actual repairability of a product, often there are software or hardware limits that are created specifically to reduce the potential repairability of a product. One typical example is parts pairing, limiting the extent to which replace a spare part, potentially a non-original one, could reduce the functionality of a product. And for the first time, this directive provides an attempt at preventing such practices. And we will now be looking at what is the impact that it's generating, particularly as the text leaves the potential for interpretation in a limiting way. Next. One of that potentially the only aspect of the directive that actually covers a wider range of products is the requirement that when consumers choose during the legal guarantee period to have a product repaired rather than accepting a replacement product to be sent to them, they will have the right to at least the 12 months of additional duration of the legal guarantee. This currently doesn't happen if you accept a replacement product, let's say after 6 months of owning a product. You might receive a replacement product, but you will only have the remaining months of your existing legal guarantee. However, only time will tell what level of impact this will have on people actively choosing to have a product repair rather than accepting a replacement. And in fact, even in its own impact assessment for the directive, the document does state that it is not likely to convert so many people to go from having a product replaced to having it repaired. Next. Now, one of the potentially most impactful aspects of this directive is the fact that it will require member states to implement at least one national measure to promote repair. And these measures could be financial or non-financial. The directive includes a non-binding list of options, and they could include things ranging from providing support, including financial support, to community repair initiatives, which is obviously something that we're not questioning, or information campaigns. However, we think that the highest potential is to extend the range of financial measures supporting repair, such as repair vouchers and funds that already are in existence in some European countries, and making them more widely available, as to indeed reduce the burden of the high cost of repairing a product, and doing so not just for future products that people might buy compliant with new repairability criteria, but actually covering products that people already own today, which, if the spirit of the whole legislation is to have, as soon as possible, an impact on reducing unnecessary consumption and manufacturing of new products, this would be the most impactful way. However, there is no mandatory requirement to set up a repair voucher scheme or a repair fund. And so we are advocating for the implementation phase for this to be favored. Next. One other aspect that is likely to increase the level of information available to consumers is the creation of an online platform listing all types of repair and buyback solutions in member states, and providing more access to harmonized cost estimations. I don't have much to say about this because we will only be able to comment on it as it becomes implemented. Hopefully, it will indeed create more simplified access to repair options for people that might not be aware of where they can more easily access repair options locally. Next. I've decided to list a few missed opportunities, not to criticize per se the legislation, but given that this legislation can be the source of inspiration for others in the Asia Pacific region, maybe there are some other aspects that can be taken into account when looking for inspiration. So these opportunities were things that were discussed, particularly as the EU Parliament listed some of these potential opportunities, but then in the final negotiations, they didn't make it through. And so potentially we shouldn't be looking just to have a product repair if certain criteria are met, but our goal should be to make sure that repair is the default option as much as possible. And so limiting the range of spare parts that people and information that people can or can't access is an issue. So extending as much as possible the range of tools, the software and hardware tools for people to be able to perform repair and diagnosis is quite essential if we want to ensure a maximum extension of the lifespan of the product. We need more easily accessible information about the prices of repair. And we also would love for more products to be added at a faster pace and not having to require very lengthy negotiations on what could be considered like the main criteria for repairability of each individual product. And of course, what I mentioned at the beginning and throughout that, defining reasonable price is something that is complex. We know that for most people, if a product repair is more than 30 to 40% of the cost of the repair, including both labor and the spare part, they're not likely to actually choose to have that product repaired. So we should aim to go from a product being potentially repairable to a product being actually repaired and continue to be used. I think that's all. Next. Yeah, just our contacts and happy to stay in touch. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Ugo, and thank you for giving these other ideas of what could have been included in the directive of the EU. It's great inspiration for our audience in Asia. Asia, where repair is really not a new concept. It's rooted in daily life and it's a vital local industry. But as Eva noted and you noted, products are becoming more complex and we see more and more barriers in Asia too, digital, legal, or physical. So that's why for Asia too, where there is still very much a repair culture, it's important to look at ways to make it easier for consumers to repair. So I'd like now, thank you very much, Ugo. It was really fascinating to introduce our panel of experts. So maybe we can bring back up the slides. So I can introduce them. I'd like to welcome them, Ms. Ada Preziosi, who is a legal officer of DG Just, one of the, we can say, ministries of the European Commission, one of the Directorate Generals of the European Commission. Eva Bieler, whom you've already heard opening, the head of circular economy of European Environmental Bureau, and also joining us, Ed Radcliffe, who is executive director of the Southeast Asia Public Policy Institute in Bangkok. And they made a research study not so long ago about right to repair in Thailand. And together with Ugo, whom we heard, last but not least, Ms. Spriha Pandey, who is senior manager in public policy at Chase Advisors, based in New Delhi, India. So thank you very much for joining us, all of you. And I look forward to the discussions. And after this presentation, which was presenting to us the elements of the right to repair, but also what could have been there, what didn't make it, and what maybe will make it in a revision in the future, who knows? I'd like to ask Ms. Ada Preziosi to tell us what was the vision of the directive, what is the vision of the directive, and how is implementation being rolled out now that it's just starting? Ada?
Thank you very much, Elodie. Hello, everyone. And thank you indeed very much, Ugo, because you laid down quite well the presentation and the foundation element of the directive. So I don't have to have my own presentation. That's very helpful. Maybe indeed just to clarify, as you already explained a little bit. So in the EU, we don't have one single legislation on the right to repair. We kind of call this directive right to repair directive to make it kind of simple, but actually in the EU we have many different initiatives. So we are not thinking about only one instrument. And the reason for that is that indeed we believe that there are so many bottlenecks to repair at different levels of the economy. And so we are trying to target with different pieces of legislation these different actors. And indeed, first of all, when we were designing this directive, the idea was as well that we need to look at the reasons why consumers don't want to repair their goods. And indeed, the elements that were already mentioned were crucial. So the fact that the products are not designed to be repairable. Then we have also high prices of repair. And we have also difficulties from what we have seen of consumers to actually handle repair. So difficulties to find who can repair. Then even if they do repair, it is somehow cumbersome sometimes to actually do the repair, the lack of replacement products during repair. And also we looked at indeed the legal guarantee and to see how we can further promote repair in this context. So we were looking broadly at this topic, but I would like to underline we were looking at it from the consumer perspective. So the objective of this directive was not to build a repair market. The repairers as such are not the primary focus of this legislation. So we have in the EU legislation focusing on manufacturers, and indeed we have product-specific design rules to make products repairable, where we also have obligations on manufacturers to make certain spare parts available. And then we also are looking at other aspects. There are other initiatives ongoing right now, such as, for example, Circular Economy Act, that is also looking more from a business perspective on potential ways how to help economies, potentially maybe also repairers, to build up their business cases in the circular economy. So I want to highlight this point that we are looking at it from different perspectives, and there's no one fit for all solution. Now, indeed, the main element of the directive is the obligation to repair for manufacturers. And we designed it in this way, linking it to repairability requirements, because we wanted to give certainty to consumers that products can be repairable. Because if the product already has to meet certain repairability requirements to be legally placed on the market, then consumers can be certain that these products can be repairable. And what we have seen before is that indeed manufacturers often were refusing or trying to avoid repair products, even if they were repairable to some extent. So indeed, we have this list of products in annex to the directive that is very limited right now, and that is going to expand. So indeed, we have the obligation in the directive that whenever there are new repairability requirements set at the EU level, we will need to add these new categories of products to the annex. We already prepared the first delegated act that is going to add one new product to the annex. And basically, I think that the way the work will be going on, we can expect that every year there will be an update. And in this update, we will try to update new products for which reparability requirements have been established. Just to give you a few examples now, colleagues indeed in other directorate generals are working on such requirements for computers, for printers. So there's constantly a flow of work. Indeed, it takes some time. It's not a speedy process. I recognize that. But this is the decision that the co-legislators took. So we are moving towards long-term solutions. I think something also interesting in this context is to say that the Commission is also working on establishing new horizontal reparability requirements. And this would mean that we would have certain requirements for much broader categories of products. And if these are adopted, now the work is ongoing, this would also significantly broaden the scope of the annex. So this is, I think, in the matter of next couple of years to see this work to be finalized, and so that we can also much more extend the scope of the annex. Another element that was mentioned indeed has to do with the reasonableness of the price. I also recognize this is a topic that we will see how it will develop in the implementation process. Now, we don't know yet how the member states will transpose the directive. They have the deadline for this until the end of July. So it remains to be seen whether they will decide on the basis of their own national legislation to go more in details. Now, while the concept of a reasonable price may seem quite vague and open to interpretation, I have to say that we are working in a consumer law field, and the concept of reasonable expectations and such vague concept is something we deal with every day. And indeed, some member states, when transposing consumer law legislation in the EU, they do put more specificity. So for example, when we talk about reasonable time in certain directives, we have member states that specify that this reasonable time is 15 days or 30 days. So also here, the member states have certain flexibility to decide how they would like to interpret this term. I expect that indeed we would have some disputes on this, also in particular in the cross-border context, because that would be a challenge for this directive, which is not so typical for consumer law, because we will have consumers in one country, manufacturers in others, and so there will be a lot of cross-border cases, which will add some difficulties and challenges to the implementation. So indeed, we are at the moment very closely monitoring how the member states will transpose the directive, and to see to what extent, if necessary, certain guidelines perhaps will be needed at certain time. But indeed, we have many different products, different spare parts, and to establish what reasonable is can be quite difficult. Now, maybe also to add what was said before, given this difficulty, we do have a provision in the directive that says that manufacturers must make publicly available information on their repair services, including the prices of typical repairs of the goods that they sell. So we do expect that from now on, from end of July 2026, when this directive has to be transposed and will become applicable, manufacturers put on their website this information so that already consumers at the moment when they want to consider buying a new product, they can go to the manufacturer website and see how much this repair could cost. So how much it would cost to replace a screen in a smartphone or a battery. And we believe that with this transparency, we are going to go into the good direction, and we still want to leave it to some extent to the market to decide what reasonable is, because it has to be reasonable for consumer, but also has to be reasonable for the businesses. So at the moment, it's still yet too early to see how this will develop, but indeed, we will be very looking closely at this element. And now maybe the last aspect I just wanted also to raise is the issue of the platform. So maybe to clarify that in principle, the directive applies to all the products on the market. So the legal guarantee aspect covers everything. Also, the repair platform will cover all the products on the market. It's just this the obligation to repair indeed that is limited to the products in the annex. And on this platform, so maybe one first important thing to mention is that while we are creating European repair platform, we have given the choice for the member states to decide whether they want to join that platform or whether they want to have their own national platform. And the reason for that was that some member states already have certain platforms and they may want to maintain it. So at the moment, we do not know yet which member states will join the platform. They have to notify it by the end of July this year. And so we will have a broader information about who is actually joining. We hope as many member states as possible. But again, we need to wait for this confirmation. And so indeed, the platform, it has been already decided that the platform will be hosted on so-called Your Europe portal. It's like a European portal of the European Commission, where we provide information to businesses and citizens on their rights. And there will be integrated a new module where consumers will be able to indeed say that they want to repair this type of product or this type of product. And the interface will look a little bit like a Google Maps. So you will be able to use certain filters and then see the different pins, click on the pins, find information about specific repairers. So the work there is ongoing. We are legally obliged to make this platform operational as of 1st of January 2028. And I'm happy to say that we are for the moment on time to achieve this. Also, one element probably that is worth mentioning is that while the directive indeed makes it very open and unrestricted for anybody to register on that platform, the member states have a possibility to impose certain access conditions. Again, the same deadline applies, so we need to wait a couple of months more to know whether they will do it, but they will be able to say that, for example, only professional repairers can register on that platform, or that repair cafes cannot register on the platform. So this is also something to bear in mind, that we have this division of competences, and it was decided that member states will have certain flexibility there. So still many open points. If we organize maybe this webinar in a year, we will have more clarity on where we are. But this is a little bit the picture, and maybe indeed the last point, as you said, Ugo, on this on the measures. We also would like to invite member states as much as possible that they adopt measures promoting repair of financial nature. So we need to join forces, but we are also aware at the same time of budget constraints. And so we had to leave some flexibility to the member states, depending on their situation, to what extent they want to engage and to what extent they are able to provide for this financial help for repairers, and so mainly for consumers, because we are aware that indeed this high repair prices is a strong barrier at the moment. So I think in spirit of the time, I'll close now and leave some time for questions in case. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ada. It's really interesting to see how you need to define very carefully the words that you choose to place in the directive, and also how this is one tool out of many tools of the toolbox of the EU to ensure that repairability becomes a reality in people's lives. So thank you for that. And before turning to Asia, I'd just like to ask Eva, also from civil society in Europe, the similar question. From your perspective, what was the vision of this directive, and implementation is at its very early stages, but how do you see it's going on now?
Thank you, Elodie, and thanks also to Ada and Ugo for outlining the Right to Repair Directive and the whole ecosystem indeed that exists around it. I think that's a really important point. also from the last legislature, the Empowering Consumers for the Green Transition Directive, which is another directive around in this ecosystem that introduces obligations on traders to provide information on the repairability and durability of a product at the point of sale. So new labeling requirements and, reminding consumers of the duration of the legal guarantee and longer offered commercial guarantee of durability. These parts around the ecosystem, I think, are incredibly important because it's not just about one right to repair here, but about factually making repair happen. And I'm very excited to hear that the Circular Economy Act will potentially address some of these issues around the business case, because I think the key question here is not whether theoretical repair is possible, though of course this is important. Theoretical repair needs to be possible, but are products factually repaired? We need the economics and the business incentives for repair to make sense. And the economic realities are very different if we're talking about a washing machine or an AirPod or a car or a cardigan. So I think it's really important that the Circular Economy Act looks into these incentives and also looks at the different realities of, well, if a spare part is a button or if a spare part is a carburetor. These are very different realities, and it needs to make business sense for businesses, of course, but certainly also for consumers, so that the incentives don't point in the wrong direction. So I think that's the vision, as you asked, is indeed to enshrine of the Right to Repair Directive, to enshrine in law the right for consumers to repair their products, to access affordable spare parts and have access to the dismantling of key components. I think the environmental and social benefits of this principle is clear, and also for the competitiveness compared to new products for small and medium-sized enterprises in Europe or outside of Europe that offer repair-related services. But I think from a civil society perspective, as Ugo already outlined, it is problematic that the scope of this right is limited to product groups that already are covered by eco-design criteria. And I think indeed the horizontal repairability requirements, as mentioned by Ada in the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products regulation, are going to be really important. But I think also from what we hear so far, the scope of even the horizontal repairability requirements is not all products ever invented in the world. It is still a limited scope, mainly electronics. So we hope that they will be more all-encompassing, and that it can then cover not just the products that we already know, but also products that will come in the future, new inventions, new copies, new single-use electronics or single-use vapes or whatever is not that these should in theory exist at all, but that's a different discussion. But that the scope of the repairability requirement is not limited by what already exists in the Eco-Design Directive. And then I think the other key point, as already outlined, is indeed the reasonable definition of affordable. And if we all agree that repair manuals should be open access, then should we consider intellectual property rights to be an acceptable excuse in any of these cases? Yes, those are, I mean, these are all things you've heard from the other speakers, but I think it's important for us to outline that these are the economics and the definitions and the scope need to be comprehensive and well defined for this to make meaningful sense.
Thank you very much, Eva. Thank you for that, and for underlining also the case of the market incentives, that really there needs to be a business case for all of this to happen in reality. And so this was more of a European perspective, and I think there were lots of insights for our Asian audience. But now we'll look more at the trends of right to repair legislation in Asia. And I'd like to turn to Ms. Priha and hear from you, Spriha. What are these trends of the right to repair legislation in India? And perhaps you can tell us how these compare to the EU's vision.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for having me and for setting the context to Ugo and Ada. So in Asia, and this is particularly true for India, so right to repair is emerging incrementally rather than in strict mandates. So to give a very, very quick background to what is happening in India. So in 2022, India identified 4 sectors for its repair legislations, and these were cutting across starting from farming equipment to mobile phones to automobiles and consumer durables. So over the last 2, 3 years now, what's happened is the government has actively put together a repairability index for mobile phones and tablets that require manufacturers to self declare the repairability of a product based on some standards and scoring criteria. Now, if we look at the point of convergence with EU, then essentially we need to understand that the intention of both the frameworks, whether it's the European Right to Repair Directive or India's Repairability Index, as we are calling it, the intention is to empower consumers about product repairability right at the point of purchase. So the framework, and credit must be given where it's due. So the framework that India is developing borrows from EU on key criteria, and I think Ugo and Ada, they've both sort of extensively delved into it. Some of these are the availability of spare parts, the access to repair information and manuals, what is the ease of disassembly and modular design of the product, whether or not tools and diagnostic services are easily accessible, and what are the software support and updates that are being extended to the consumers. So essentially, both regions, be it EU or be it India, they are actively working to curb what we very commonly call planned obsolescence by discouraging design choices that block or reduce repair and create dependency on proprietary tools that are not easily available. However, if so, these were the points of convergence between the repair trends in Asia and or India and Europe. But if we look at the way things are in India right now, the key difference with EU is in the enforcement part. So we need to understand that India is considering only a scoring and a disclosure based model, whereas from what we understand of the EU, it's more of a compliance model. And this difference exists because the market in India, we have to understand, is not as mature as it is for Europe or for the rest of the world. So the focus in India right now is to build the market readiness by making consumers aware that repair can be a right, and it is actually very, very easy to do. Because while we historically say that India and Asia, we have repairability embedded in our DNA, that is of course true, but we also need to understand that when it comes to complex electronics, there are not that many people who choose to open your own laptops or mobile phones or even consumer durables at your own inside the confines of your own homes. So the focus is to first build market readiness by making consumers aware, and this entire approach to repairability in India is also being seen as a step towards enhancing skills in the refurbishment ecosystem, which so far has been extremely informal. And the path that India is taking also shows India's trend of contextual regulation and not just copy paste legislation, because we're just drawing inspiration from EU and other legislations and sort of tweaking them to suit the Indian context. So, if I have to sort of summarize my submission to this question, it would be that while Europe's right to repair framework is more right based, India's approach reflects an Asia specific trajectory, one that focuses on first building repair ecosystems through transparency and market readiness. So, intrinsically, I think the convergence is on the principles and the divergence is on the pace and the pathway of how that is taken up.
Many thanks, Priya. Thank you for highlighting the differences in the market, and obviously also the size of market, its maturity, and although the size may be comparable, but there are a lot of differences between these two continents. So obviously the implementation is going to look different. And now I'd like to hear more from Southeast Asia through Ed Radcliffe. Could you tell us, Ed, what are the trends of right to repair in, I think you studied more Thailand, but maybe more Southeast Asia, and how does this compare to the EU's vision?
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for having me on. So yeah, we did a piece of work last year which focused mostly on my mobile devices, and focus on the Thailand market. But as part of that piece of work, we did do a bit of a scan of what else is going on across Asia. And as Spriya mentioned, I think India is actually one of the hotspots or the kind of the bright spots in terms of policy development. There are a few others. I think Australia passed some right to repair laws with regard to automotive sector in 2021. And South Korea also has a repair strategy based around a framework act on resource circulation. So there's broader stuff going on across the APAC region. In Southeast Asia itself, it's not a huge amount in terms of policy development, but quite a lot of interest, particularly from civil society and repair networks, and particularly around the DIY repair movement. I think just focusing on that, a lot of policy development, I think in this region comes from, we'll need to reflect the market realities, and just looking at the development of right to repair approaches from the US versus Europe. Europe is very sustainability focused and very much based around that sustainability circular economy strategy. A lot of the US state level laws is grounded and sort of driven by like a more independent DIY repair movement. So they're coming from slightly different angles. In Southeast Asia, I mean, we looked specifically at Thailand. I think some of the attention in the past couple of years has been around this defective product liability bill that was being developed by the consumer regulators here in Thailand. It's known as a lemon law in broader kind of consumer law parlance. It is not a repair bill, but it does mention repair and repairability I think for the first time in Thai legislation. And so there was some attention given to that it could possibly, that aspect of it could possibly be a bit more developed in terms of making the lemon law reflect repairability standards and increase repairability in Thailand overall. Our report, we also did quite a lot of on the ground data collection. So we did interviews with, I think, around 40 repair shops, and this is often 1 or 2 man shops in some of the tier 2 malls around Bangkok, to gather their sort of on the ground views and the sort of issues that they face. Again, just kind of contextually, repair, as you mentioned, is quite big across Southeast Asia. It's pretty big here in Thailand in terms of just being able to get things repaired. But obviously, you may void your warranty or your guarantee from the manufacturer if you get it repaired. So you get more out of your air conditioning unit, but it might not be able to go back to the manufacturer, or if that needs to happen. But yeah, the sort of feedback that we were getting from the repair shops was the usual stuff. I think parts pairing is a big issue for many. The access to materials and parts, access to schematics and information. We learned that a lot of these repair guys were self-educating on YouTube. So from YouTube videos a lot of the time, obviously because new mobile phones are coming out and there's a lot of information being shared across the kind of the global repair movement about how to repair these things. Interestingly as well, there was some degree of suspicion when we were going out and talking to these people. And sorry, I should have mentioned earlier, we partnered with Rangsit University here in Bangkok, which has a great consumer law department. So there was a team of Thai PhDs going out and doing a lot of this work. But there was some suspicion around it, and a lot of that is to do with the grey market, particularly in parts. Obviously mobile phones as well, so they're sort of parallel import sort of stuff. So again, that sort of access to real products, real parts. A lot of the time they're using maybe third-party unlicensed parts as well to repair this sort of stuff. So there's plenty of scope, I guess, to upgrade repair overall in Thailand, in Southeast Asia. And we, in our report, we made several recommendations as to how that could be done, whether it's through new legislation, adapting current bills, or consumer law. But I think it's really important here to build on that consumer, the kind of the consumer law side of it, because actually the repair sector is there and it's fairly affordable and accessible, but consumers aren't necessarily being protected if they go and engage with it.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you very much. You made me smile. I was thinking of my repair person in Vientiane. There's just one, not 40 here. And also
Yeah,
of the time I've spent on YouTube videos trying to repair things myself. So I
very
can,
impressive.
yes, no, but this I can really relate to these experiences and also to these repair people that yes, they struggle absolutely to get quality parts and to know how to pair them with the existing electronic. So thank you for that. I would like now to maybe go back to Ugo and to hear from Ugo, so maybe some reflections on what's been already discussed, but also to learn from you how are companies and consumers already integrating right to repair principles in Europe today.
Yes, thank you. And I think just a comment on what Ed was just saying now. Evidently, looking at the different uh, moments we're at in Europe versus in Asia, there are different reasons why repair might be more affordable or less affordable in the two regions. And so I just would like to say, of course, in theory, some products are repairable if the cost of the time involved for a longer disassembly is not the highest proportion of the cost of a repair, while obviously in Europe, where the cost of labor is higher, while the cost of accessing a certain product is new product is lower, then making a certain product easier to disassemble for repair is important to increase the likelihood that the product actually gets repaired. So it's true that by struggling, repair heroes can get to repair certain products even today, but improving the actual repairability has a direct impact on these products getting repaired at a wider scale. And to make an example of all of this, obviously, I want to bring back the perspective of community repair groups and organizations. We at the Restart Project, alongside partners, every year publish an open data set that has data from community repair groups, repair cafes from around the world. The majority of the groups contributing are from within Europe, but there's groups from Australia, from Aotearoa, New Zealand, from the US, Canada, Argentina, and more contributing as well from South Sudan and Uganda. I see our friend and partner Mathieu Lubari is in the room today. So we have data that shows that products can be repaired. So if you look at our data set that has hundreds of thousands, at this point over 300,000 repair attempts from around the world done in a collaborative, community-oriented way by volunteers helping members of the public learn more about repair. You see that it is possible to repair like over more than half of the products that are brought to these repair initiatives are repaired on the spot, and up to a quarter require a second visit to be repaired. The point is, at times, these heroic efforts are quite lengthy, and so they happen exactly because there is no problem in investing extra free time to make that happen. And of course, there are learning experience. But if we want to move beyond that, we need to find incentives and financial incentives that reduce the cost perceived or that expand the likelihood that for certain products we we can expand the percentage of these products that is repaired and reused for longer. So initiatives going in that respect. And Ada mentioned that willingness to get more financial incentives to make repair the norm are are really important, well, we should put more of an emphasis there, particularly for parts of the world where the current cost of labor is quite high. Back to the second part of your question, Elodie. So consumers clearly are acting on this, and so we also see the examples of the community repair movement organizing in new waves that go from the temporary 3 hour a month repair cafe models to more permanent spaces. Some cities are recognized, and waste authorities are recognizing the importance of these structures, so supporting that. We see some of this in London, where we are directly developing what we call fixing factories, where people can learn more skills. So basically, the question is, for certain products for which the price point is very low, what are the real options to increase repair? So supporting those more DIY approaches, or do it together approaches, as we like to say, is one way of doing it. But of course, there are manufacturers that are trying to be more transparent and kind of pioneering better ways by either making repair all spare parts available directly to consumers, or committing to price points for their spare parts and long-term availability to these spare parts, which shows that it's possible. But the reason we need this to be enshrined in legislation is because the difference between being possible and being widely available is quite crucial.
Yes, thank you, Ugo. It's the yes mandatory word is makes a lot of difference in circular economy in many areas. And I'd like to maybe hear from Ed on this question as well, on how you see in Asia, in Thailand or Southeast Asia more broadly, how are companies and consumers already integrating right to repair principles? Um, and maybe as you were describing some changes in the law, how this is already perhaps changing some habits in the repair culture, perhaps if you can see already that.
Yeah, I mean, in the interviews we did with the repair shops, I mean, so first of all, they cited sort of what they were being asked to repair as mostly screens, mostly batteries. I think there's a generational issue as well that was reported in that. I mean, this is a generalization, but there is still a tendency now amongst, let's say, newer consumers to not engage in repair. So I think there is a bit of a job to be done to raise awareness of repairability and repair options in Thailand. There is some work being done. I'm really sorry that I'm having a name blank in terms of the organization that's doing it, but there is someone doing a repairability index or some kind of research around that in Thailand. I think one of the bigger things, and just with regard to the EU, there is this, the concept of a Brussels effect. And I think actually developments in the EU to improve repairability by multinational corporations, right? Because the products that are being sold in Asia and Southeast Asia are, largely the same when it comes to mobile phones and computers and stuff like that, largely the same as the ones that are being sold in the EU. So if there is a general drive from a very large advanced market like the EU towards things being made in a more repairable way, then that can only have a net positive effect on repairability in other markets. That's not to say that everyone needs to copy paste EU legislation, but I think it provides quite a useful baseline for other governments to reference when they are developing their own repairability. But yeah, I hope that answers definitely on the consumer side.
Yes, thank you. No, it's great to see that there might be some trickle-down effect of this right to repair legislation of the EU. But maybe that brings me to another question that I had in mind for Spriha. Is there a possibility that there will be the creation of a two-tier market where there would be repair-friendly goods that are exported to the EU, while less durable and non-repairable versions are sold within Asian domestic markets? What are your views on that, Spriha?
I think the fear is very it's not unfounded, of course, and we in India are of the opinion that preventing a two-tier market where repair-friendly goods are exported to the EU while non-repairable versions are sold in Asian markets or India, to prevent that, it requires an alignment of market transparency and also strengthening the capacity of the repair ecosystem. Regulation alone is not going to help, solve this problem or keep it at bay. We need to use transparency as a tool to sort of discourage design divergence. So, when consumers are aware of product repairability right at the time of purchase, then manufacturers don't have as much incentive to maintain different design standards for different geographies. Uh, so, here we feel that harmonization with EU's established repairability practices can help achieve this coherence. It will do away, at least it should in principle, do away with the commercial logic of exporting better products while downgrading domestic offerings if there is no difference in design offerings. Also, we need to understand that this sort of a two-tier market often emerges when the downstream repair or refurbishment capacity is weak. So to tackle this, India is sort of also working on a framework. We are calling it domestically the ERSO framework, and the full form for that is the electronics repair and services outsourcing. So the idea is that we use this framework to strengthen the repair ecosystem and position the country as a global repair hub rather than merely a market for consumption or disposal. The framework is essentially it has a lot of aspects, and I don't want to make a technical session out of it. We can save it for another conversation. But essentially, the framework is being designed to enable seamless import of electronic products for repair and refurbishment. And once the repair is done in India, the said product will be re-exported to the originating market. So this will ensure that the country is not used as a dumping ground for end of life or substandard products, because we very firmly believe that repair rights without repair capacity is very theoretical. So it's only when you sort of combine transparency on repairability, which is something that we are getting through our repairability index, with ERSO, through which we sort of want to build the repair capacity not just for re-export but also for the overall informal repair ecosystem as it exists in the country. So we be hoping that together these two will reduce the risk of number one, low repairability products being diverted into domestic markets, or end of life goods being pushed into countries with weaker repair ecosystem. And so the focus is that the products will retain their economic repair value within India, and it will also help close the gap that typically may result in the two-tier outcome that we don't want, obviously. So in summary, I think preventing a two-tier market is ultimately about building repair capacity, not just regulation alone. And this is where we feel that the repairability index and the ERSO framework sort of have to work hand in hand, where the index creates transparency and the ERSO framework will will leverage the informal repair workforce that we have, sort of make it formal to help deliver global grade repair services. And all of this together will actively position India as a repair hub and not as a dumping ground.
Thank you. Thank you, Spriha, for these insights. I see Ed has raised his hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Spriya, I mean, it's really interesting. And obviously, you come from India, which is like such a huge market that there's different opportunities for India in comparison to a smaller market of Thailand or somewhere like that, which is 60, 70 million people. I think the thing is, in the way that these, for example, mobile phones are developed, you're going to have it's going to be more costly for manufacturers to create two different factory lines, one that's repairable and one that isn't repairable. So I would say that the differentiation is probably going to come where you have global brands, like let's say the next generation of iPhone. It's unlikely there's going to be two different versions of the next generation of iPhone, one which is repairable, one which is not. It's likely that it will be globally compliant and will be up to EU standards, and then that's being sold in other markets. I guess the tier 1, tier 2 thing is where you have certain products which are not being sold in Europe, perhaps, sort of tier 2, tier 3 brands that are then not needing to meet the criteria of EU because they're not being sold on that market. So I think the thing with those tier 1 global brands as well is that it's really important for local policy development, which is on those aspects which are not to do with the physical nature of the product itself, is to do with the consumer law, with the guarantees, the warranties, and also the software aspects, which is, again, it's not to do with how phones are made, it's to do with software control, which is, much easier to differentiate between markets rather than the way that you glue a phone together and stuff like that.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for making that differentiation. I see that Ugo wanted to answer, but maybe it's been
Yeah,
covered.
no, I guess I wanted to just say something quite similar to what Ed said, but from a different perspective. For once, I wanted to look at the UK as being not in the EU, but obviously we operate in the UK as the Restart Project, and we're campaigning for the right to repair in the UK, which is now different from campaigning for the same topic in the EU. And we do see there are some nuances here because part of the UK being directly bordering the EU, some of the obligations for compliance to eco-design requirements of products actually apply to at least part of the UK more directly. But when it comes to the consumer rights aspects, indeed, you are not necessarily covered. So all that we see in terms of supplementing design requirements to make sure that actually repair might be viable really needs to be thought through in across all regions. And then there is indeed the chance that some parts of the world can be the dumping ground for products that were not destined or that are not targeting to meet the requirements for other parts of the world. So the product might be quite cheap, but come without any level of post after sales support that isn't maybe replacing a faulty product with another unit of the same product, but no availability of spare parts and no availability of minimum requirements for software support. And for products that are more and more dependent on software, this is a big issue because a product that stops being supported is often likely to turn into early obsolescence. So yeah, we shouldn't just look at whether a product is designed in a certain way, but what is the overall ecosystem. And on the other hand, just a comment on what Priya was saying earlier, the capacity to perform repair is equally important. So looking at measures that support a return to a repair economy. I appreciate, obviously, in countries like India, there is a larger capacity that still is in operation. But obviously, from a European perspective, we also need to return to a repair economy. And in some countries, there's still a rather strong repair economy. We need to make sure that it gets nurtured and that repair is a viable enterprise in the future as well.
Thank you, Ugo. And on this, there was an interesting comment. Maybe you've seen it for the listeners from Miss Mai and Nguyen. Thank you very much. Mai highlights some of the fiscal incentives that can be chosen by governments to support the repair culture and probably the businesses as well in other ways. So thank you for that. I also saw there was one question more on the textile sector, and I wanted to maybe ask Eva to answer to that question. You'll see it in the chat box about spare parts being given, so buttons being given with the item and how that creates waste. And so it touches upon a sector we haven't talked about, the textile sector. So maybe Eva, you'd like to say a few words about that.
Thank you, Elodie. And I think this is a really, really excellent question because it highlights something that is very crucial and also as points to the ecosystem, as Ada was mentioning, because the real problem here is the clash between fast fashion manufacturing and consumer habits. Because if the products are designed with weak, easily lost buttons, but the garment is not designed to last, then of course this ends up becoming clutter. And this points to the larger issue of ultra fast fashion. And I was just reading some data from the European Environmental Agency on just Europe that 675 million tons of raw materials are being used annually to fuel EU consumption of clothing, footwear, and household textiles. So that's an average of 1.3 tons per EU citizens. I think this is incredible and completely out of control. If we look at the trends, the total amount of clothes produced in the world has doubled just between 2000 and 2015. I'm sure there's more recent data, but the trends are not going in the right direction in terms of overconsumption and fast fashion. So I think this is a really important problem to tackle. And of course, the issue of the buttons becoming clutter is another important issue. But I think if we change the way that we think about our clothing, if we think of clothing as not as something that you buy and wear once and throw away, or something you buy, you get your new trends every week or every month, but think of it as something that lasts longer, then you would like to have that button in your drawer because you do want to wear it for several years and not just throw it on the pile of landfilled garments that end up on polluting beaches around the world.
Thank you, Eva, for putting that in perspective. I do have many of those buttons in my drawers as well, those spare buttons. So yes, I would like to use them for garments that last much longer indeed. Thank you for that. And maybe I'd like to encourage other participants to ask questions. Please feel welcome to. And I'd also like to ask Ada, maybe Ada, if you have any further thoughts from this webinar, anything you'd like to add from the discussions that we've had with our colleagues?
Yes, so indeed. So, I mean, it was very interesting to understand indeed the perspective in Asia and a little bit the approach there. And for example, to add to what Ed said about this issue of the guarantee being voided. So we do indeed specify it in the directive, for example, that if you repair a product by a third-party repairer, the manufacturer still is obliged to repair it. So indeed, we are aware that there are these certain practices that are out there that try to impede consumers from repairing. But I think globally, what I'm taking from this discussion is that, as we said before, there are so many elements, sort of how to make the repair market work. In reality, we have a strong need for a business case. But at the same time, where we were going now towards the end of the discussion, the consumer culture is also important. Even if we make products repairable and even if they are affordable for repair, still many consumers will not want to repair because this is the culture. Now it's true, it's changing, but I think indeed many speakers mentioned we need to inform consumers about their rights, but also about the benefits of repair, and to make this repair something like a default option, and not just a thing that we may do but then it turns out to be too expensive, so we never do. And there are so many areas where we need to act to actually build this culture of doing this as a default option. So I think there is really a lot to do, and we need to act on all of these fronts. So this is a challenging topic. I also I'm very interested in following a little bit more on what's going on in Asia following this discussion, but because I think it's a really interesting developments, especially what, as Priya said, about India's plans indeed to be this hub for repair. Because also this is one of the challenges that we will have indeed also to do with the enforcement for the directive that we have, the directive that in principle applies to all the products. Many products are produced outside of the EU, and then we may also have certain challenges on how to actually enforce these rules. So many challenges, many questions. I'm not sure if we have so many answers, but I think it just highlights how important it is to talk about this topic indeed.
Yes, thank you, Ada. I think it's just because it's only the beginning. So maybe in the last moments that we have, I have one question for Eva, perhaps, on about the discussions and investments that are you think maybe needed today in Europe and in the Asia Pacific region to really adopt right to repair principles. What do you think is needed at this stage?
It's a really good question because I think also, as Ada alluded to, I think a lot is needed because it's not just a simple on button of okay, we have repairability requirements and then job done. It's really a systemic shift that we need to have that changes how we look at products. And I think, I mean, what we would like to see as an overarching framework is a resource use reduction target. If the EU could set an overall target, as is the case with the climate and the greenhouse gas targets, on the resources that we think it's reasonable to bring into the economy. And I think, of course, globally, that would be the need to have a global resource governance framework. But I think we really need to think of resources as precious and therefore limit the overall consumption of products, because we are right now in the EU at least consuming 4 times beyond what planetary boundaries can sustain. So this is of course not possible in the long run. And I think we need, with this target or with some action to reduce the overall consumption, then the actions will need to follow on all levels, and that is of course the business models that will no longer be possible if if we cannot extract more resources than the planet can sustain. Well, then we cannot continue on this ultra fast product drive around the world. So I'm thinking of it more at the systemic framework level that then with it has enabled us for repair in the economic incentives, in the value creation, in the general just overall approach to resources that needs to change. So, okay, this is not an easy answer, but I think it is important to think of it in a wider framework of making sure that we keep having resources and clean air and nature for generations to come as well.
Yes, thank you, Eva. And we have one question in the chat that I'd like to ask to Ugo. So Florian is asking us, you have mentioned the issue of liability guarantee, work license, etc., just briefly. Wasn't this what killed repair business in Europe maybe 40 years ago? And not the EU to blame. How can this be overcome? So, Ugo, what are your
Yes,
thoughts on this?
I might not be able to answer to the whole of it, but certainly we see some issues with the push to extend guarantees. I mean, this is a topic that is is discussed quite with a variety of perspectives. I'm looking at guarantees specifically. Obviously, some people will be in favor of an extension of guarantee for a number of years for products, and maybe this could lead to products not being repairable within that legal guarantee by others that are not authorized or have contracts with the manufacturers, while having products that are actually more designed to be repaired and with all tools and all spare parts available to a wide range of actors, including community repair organizers, consumers, and independent repairers, can increase the chances of product being repaired. On liability, I think this has been used as a way to weaponize the repair ecosystem. Often, manufacturers have used safety concerns to undermine the potential for a wide range of actors to access the spare parts and the repair information. And then all of a sudden, when it becomes mandatory, it just seems to work. A case in point, I would say, is Apple, that until the last moments of negotiations for right to repair was one of the key proponents of how unsafe it is for people to repair products. Then the next day has a marketplace for spare parts, and it seems like it's not a problem anymore. So I think these issues can be used to create fears and to delay widening the range of actors that can access all kinds of tools, spare parts, and information to perform a repair. And we should avoid being convinced that repair can only be performed by a few people.
Yes, we have to open it a bit like it is in Asia. The many people in the malls in Bangkok or my gentlemen in that street in Vientiane are can do it freely. So that's a little bit keep it more open beyond the guarantee. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm jumping to a conclusion. I'd like to thank everyone for the questions and. I see there's a last question about the case of Pakistan and other repairers in the world. We might not have the time to answer to this, to give justice to this question, so I'll leave it there. I really encourage you maybe to share your further questions by email, and we'll be happy to answer them maybe more at length if possible by email. And as you know, this webinar was recorded, and you're welcome and the presentation will be shared with you as well. So you're welcome to interact more with us and with the speakers maybe after the webinar. And I'd like to really thank all of our speakers most sincerely, Ada, Ugo, Ed, Eva, and Spriha, for such a rich and insightful discussion. I also want to thank our audience for really the excellent questions that highlighted the challenges and the opportunities that this directive and the other legislation in Asia may present. And we can see that the right to repair is really a critical pillar of the circular transition. It's not only about businesses and the business case, as Ada underlined, but also about the consumers and their rights. And I really enjoyed this discussion and about a consumer empowerment and all this legislative changes, the shift that this directive and other initiatives are bringing. So at Switch Asia, we're really very committed to facilitating these exchanges between EU policymaking and the Asia Pacific context. And I encourage you to visit the Switch Asia website, but also all the links that our partners shared today, the studies that they shared. So please read through them, what's happening in Thailand and also in the Restart project. And you can visit also the resource library of Switch Asia for more details about the circular economy and the Green Deal. And I hope we'll continue these conversations in all our upcoming webinars. The next one is about the Clean Industrial Deal, and it's on the 8th of April, so stay tuned. We'll be back in April with another webinar, and we look forward to the next discussion. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
you.